All right, welcome everybody. This is USfanTV. I am Chris. Joining me tonight is TJ. Pat may or may not be with us at some point. Tonight, the technology problem is Pat's, if we have a comment on it. We'll be discussing, or I should say hi, TJ.
Good evening. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm all right. No Mary Grace tonight?
No, surprisingly not so far.
Or just no children, I guess we could say. Yeah, anyway, tonight we will be discussing the thoroughly uninspiring performance of the U.S. versus Ireland. We'll talk about this latest article from The Ringer involving Jurgen Klinsmann, Bruce Arena, the national team, looking at kind of the last 7 or 8 years, and did it all culminate in the collapse of the team last fall. We'll give our predictions for U.S. France, and we'll talk about the women's team playing China on Thursday as well. With that said, U.S. Ireland. I said thoroughly uninspiring. I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I don't. You could kind of just. I guess we could start at the back and say Bill Hamid didn't look great. Either you could say showed a lot of rust, or just the fact that he hasn't been playing just has killed his confidence and career right now. I'm hoping to God Stefan is our keeper come Saturday, but whatever. We'll keep to this game. Poor passing from the defense. Even Matt Miazga got burned on that second goal. Just nothing really looked good there. Fullbacks, not much from them. Didn't see much offense from them. Even got beat sometimes as well on defense. No connection through the midfield. Not really doing anything to break up plays coming the other way. Tyler Adams was kind of everywhere and nowhere at the same time, and maybe you could say that of kind of all of central midfield. Offense, there just wasn't much to it. So I don't know, what'd you think?
Chris, that was pretty. You covered it pretty well there. It was uninspiring, yes. Easy to sleep through if you wanted to, yes. Bill Hamid, seriously, what? Both goals were not his finest hour, but it's back to a premise that I've said on here a bunch of times, and you and I have talked about. You got to play. You've got to be playing. I don't know if it's rust, confidence. I don't care. He looked awful. It's nothing like the guy that was one of the best keepers in MLS while he was with DC United. He looked awful. Going to Europe is great. Oh, every player needs to go to Europe. If you're not going to play, it's not worth doing. You play at the highest level you can, where you get meaningful minutes. It's not hard. If that's what MLS is for, that's what it's for.
Well, I totally agree. The one thing I will say there is, I think Hamid has shown that he probably is good enough to move beyond MLS. However, maybe it's that he stayed too long. Maybe he kind of peaked or something there. Or maybe it's just by the timing that he moved, that he didn't kind of move it at a high point where he went straight into a starting job, and this is sort of the fallout of it. Otherwise, yeah, I totally agree. If you're not playing, what difference does it make if you go to Europe?
But he's playing in Denmark. I don't think of Denmark as a top quality league in the world. If that's your option, that or MLS, unless you're getting money like you would if you're going to China or the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia or something like that, stay there. Stay where you are. Get meaningful minutes. Come summertime, if you've had a good spring and you're healthy, somebody will bring you over to Europe if that's where you want to go. His move made no sense to me. It's killed, I think, any chance he has at the National League national team. I see Ryan Case mentioning Jesse Gonzalez. Ryan, you're 100% right. I think, what was interesting to me was Twellman saying there's a lot of questions about the U.S. national team and goalkeeping in 4 years. I don't think there's any question about it at this point. I think it's Zach Stefan. I think it's Jesse Gonzalez. And I think that anything, and a third one, hell, send Nick Raimondo again for all I care. You might as well. But it does
have bionic legs.
Well, he's short. His legs really, he's 5 foot nothing. It doesn't matter. But it does raise another question for me. So you bring Zach Stefan over for this qualifier, and you leave him on the bench. U.S. soccer, what are you thinking? You're going to bring a guy in, you play him. Otherwise, he's got a game with Columbus. And I get it. It's MLS. It's, again, mid-season MLS, not the end of the world. But that's a game he's going to play versus sitting on the bench against Ireland. If you're going to bring him over, you play him. I don't know what the premise or the point of that was, because the camp. Are they changing the roster between now and France, or are they keeping it?
Nope, this is it.
Okay, and that's the only reason. But even that,
injuries,
even that, they could have let him come over later, named him, and then just have him come over later, not dress him for that night. There was no point for me to bring that over there. So yeah, uninspired. You know, and as we talked about, when we were after the Paraguay game, the kids look great that night. And as we both said, there's going to be nights they look great, and there's other nights you're going to be going, how did they make it out of U16 or U17 club ball? Hell with professional or anything else. That was one of those nights. I don't think Ireland's necessarily good. I just think they had a bad night. I leave it at that. You move on.
I mean, they're a decent team. They did have a chance to qualify for the World Cup. You know, out of UEFA. That's even, I think, teams that don't make it in UEFA. I mean, look at Shittily, much as I hate to talk about that nation, or the Netherlands. You know, these are soccer powers. They are, you know, world-class teams regardless, and they didn't make it. You know, there are only so many spots in UEFA. It's tough competition. That Ireland stood a chance shows they aren't a bad team. You know, they are a solid, if maybe a mid-tier or so UEFA team. They are still a solid team, and Martin O'Neill has done well with them. You know, as I've talked about in the past, if we were to stick with the guys that we had 9 months ago, a year ago, on our team, I would like him as probably our national team coach. But, yeah, you know, in the end, this is a friendly. It's a learning experience. So you don't want to get too down on it. It's more, as we always talk about, it's really that you want to see good individual performances. And I think what really disappointed was there weren't many.
No. The one thing I will point out, and I know you get to it eventually, is Bobby Wood did find the goal. I get it. It's kind of a cleanup goal, but still, when you're lacking as much confidence as he's lacking, even having him find the back of the net on something like that, you hope can be a starter for him. I mean, I guess if I had the one positive takeaway, that might have been it, is that Bobby Wood did find the back of the net.
That was nice. Overall, at least for the first half, you know, maybe the first 60, 65 minutes or so, I liked Tim Weah. You know, he's still, in many ways, this was a further statement on everything we drew from the last game, in that his speed, his vision, his ideas all show danger, all show promise. His final touch, his final ball, his shot, you know, the cross, whatever, that last touch, he still struggles with. But until that point, there's a lot to like there. You know, when the rumor first was that he had signed with PSG, my feeling was generally like, oh, this is just sort of a pat on the back to his dad because of his history with PSG. But it's not inconceivable that he could play for him. Do I see him playing for them with, you know, guys like Neymar there? No, but will PSG forever be the current team that it is? I don't know. So you know, it's not outside the realm of possibility that he could play for a Champions League team in the near future, and I mean regularly, not just make appearances. And in that regard, maybe that last touch does improve. It's going to have to improve for him to truly see minutes.
Well, yeah, well, no, not necessarily. Zardes still was getting minutes, and his first touch is legendary. So I'm not really sure you necessarily have a great first touch to feature for the national team. We'd like to hope that it becomes a necessity as we move
I meant
forward.
more for PSG, but
okay.
I do think going forward for the national team, this is going to become much more important too. I mean, realistically, and I guess that was one of the things that also was kind of let down. This is a team of, quote unquote, real footballers. It's not just guys who work hard and will out hustle, out muscle you. These are guys who can, in theory, outplay many of the individual players they may see out there on different teams. So there's still, there's still a hope, but this was definitely, I guess, if you want to look at it positively, you'd call it a learning experience.
Oh, and to be true, do you criticize Dave Sarachan? I mean, in a sense of, it didn't look like there's a comprehensive game plan. Now, is there a point to not really have a comprehensive game plan and kind of just see what you have? Because he's not going to be the coach going forward. You don't start implementing a system when you're not going to be the one to see it through. So you kind of let's see what these kids have and give them a little less guidance. Or is that just how Sarachan's running his system for now?
See, if that were truly it, I would probably be more supportive of Sarachan, because it is true that, if nothing else, you are trying to throw possibilities out there, and you're just trying to see what's available. In a sense, you are priming the pump for the next manager. On the other hand, I can't imagine even seeing the writing on the wall that Sarachan isn't, in a sense, auditioning it as well. That the longer that he stays, the longer, or the better chance maybe he sticks around in some kind of capacity. Whether he does truly get the job, I doubt that. But whether that happens, whether he gets an assistant job with the next manager as well, I think you are sort of positioning yourself for maybe a shot in the future. So he doesn't want to totally abandon the program or just kind of like throw up his hands and go, I don't know, you guys figure it out. But
to be fair,
on the other hand, I would have liked to have seen more chances taken with this roster.
Sure.
Let's see Keaton Parks. Let's see what the hell he does. I think he did. Did he pick up some kind of little injury or something? So maybe that's the excuse there. But I would have, honestly, I probably would have gone with Josh Sargent over Bobby Wood. I mean, I'm happy Wood got to play. I'm happy he got a goal. And I as I've said before, I hope this translates into something for him this summer, because he's got to find a spot right now where if I'm play consistently. Hopefully get back to scoring. But in the meantime, I would have gone Josh Sargent.
I agreed on that. I think Josh Sargent would have been a better bet. I was a little surprised. I know you sent a lineup to Pat and I of what you thought should be out there, and I know you had Sargent in there, not Bobby Wood. We were both a little surprised with that. Bobby Wood needs to go somewhere to play. If I'm Bobby Wood, I'm going right back to Union Berlin. I had success there. I was good there. It translated into good form for the national team. I would seriously look at that and say, hey, can I come back? I was good for you guys once. I'm sure Union Berlin would take him back, and I think that'd just be a good fit. See if you can find your form. Go back to what was working for you before you try and go somewhere else and bury yourself even deeper into the pit of mediocrity, for lack of a better term. So, yeah, it's one of those, like you said, it's a learning experience. Thankfully, we don't, it's kind of like whose line is it anyway stage of the U.S. men's national team. The points don't matter, and neither do the results. So let's move on.
Yeah, that said, I'm not predicting a healthy scoreline versus France. I'm kind of just hoping we say what the hell and just go with kids and tell them, look, you're just out there to try and show something. This is your chance to go play against Paul Pogba or whatever, like just kind of say it doesn't matter. Just have fun today.
But and everybody's sitting there, and I'm looking through the chat line. Everyone thinks France is just going to absolutely blast the living daylights out of them. I don't think so, and I'm going to tell you why. And it's a simple reason. France's goal is to get through 90 minutes healthy. At this point, that's
the one thing that's probably looking good for us.
This for France, I get it. It's their send-off game. Everybody wants to go out on a positive note. I see these send-off games becoming more and more like the last preseason game for the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
All your goal is to get your guys healthy, get them through the game, and be ready in form as much as need to be. You don't need to go full pedal to the metal in a game where your goal is to get healthy to the next one. So I'm predicting a much tighter score line. I agree. The kids should go out and play, see what they've got. Get a result versus France, that's great. But if you're France, you're looking 90 minutes healthy. Let's get to Russia.
Yeah,
which I don't think I don't think they would ever say it until the Champions League finals there again. I don't think you're going to hear any Frenchman ever say again.
All right. So moving on to the Ringer article, I think Christian already asked about it. I haven't been watching the chat box as closely as normal, so maybe some others have as well. If you guys haven't read this article from the Ringer, I don't want to say amazing, but it is pretty interesting, incredibly interesting to me. You know, I tend to, as I told you, TJ, I told Pat this earlier too, that, you know, I tend to not believe theories that kind of explain everything, but damn if this doesn't do an awfully good job of pretty much explaining everything that's happened over the last about 8 years. You know, in terms of kind of what you could say led to some of the flame out in 2014, or I mean, I guess when you say we were a bad Wando away from just a Wando away from a quarterfinal match, maybe you can't say flame out, but you know, things definitely didn't go to plan there. And then all the things that have happened since, it's an incredibly interesting read. Your thoughts?
To me, it was typing here. There's been a lot of articles, a lot of analysis, a lot of theories put out as to what happened. I think this was like the all-encompassing, let's put them all together in one shot, take the best of each thing, and kind of come up with what you consider an autopsy. These type of articles started boring me 6 months ago. At this point, I feel it's like, great, what are you telling me that I already haven't read in about 2 or 3 other publications? It put them all really into one place. And
I still think, though, this one did a good job of maybe explaining how they all work together. Like, you could draw some of these conclusions. Certainly, all in all of the dissection of what's happened, we've heard much of this. And you know, the one thing that kind of stood out to me in terms of opposing maybe what some of the other things that we've looked at, in a sense, it sort of absolves Arena of a lot of responsibility for what happened in the last year. Are you disagreeing, or are you just looking at a comment?
No, I was gonna. The 2014 stuff. You had said earlier. You're talking about we're a Wando away from a quarterfinal. This is a team that lost. Didn't Josie go down like 30 minutes into the tournament?
5 minutes in,
right? I mean, you're a Josie injury away from probably a if Josie doesn't get hurt, would the quarterfinals have happened? I mean, there's a lot of. It seems like you get into these, you start seeing revisionist history as to what happened. That everything is systemic instead of looking at going, you know what? Sometimes you just get bad breaks and they don't go the way you're supposed to. Again, the World Cup's going to start. The U.S. national team's not there. I've said this time and time again. You can't even. How many things had to go wrong that night for the national team, and they all did. The shitty goal Mexico gave up, or whatever the ball crossed the line.
The goal for Panama that didn't happen.
Right. I mean, how many things like that had to happen? Kind of like 4 years earlier for Mexico with Sanzouzi. A lot of things had to go right for Mexico to make it, and they did. Here it was karma. In the U.S., it didn't happen. So to me, there's that's the other part of revisionist history. Yes, there was tons of bad to look at, bad tactics, bad ideas, bad chemistry throughout. For for the hard on that US soccer had for Jurgen for years. It just seems like it was more about Jurgen than it was about the player, and there was never that chemistry. That might be, maybe that's my revisionist history, but I never felt like there was a cohesive unit ever within that. And I think you've mentioned that once or twice. You're kind of going, everybody wasn't sure what their role was going to be. Nobody was sure where they were going to be playing. There was a lack of really a lack of leadership at that point, but it becomes, a lot of bad things in the, so I don't know. Just like I said, that these articles bore me. I usually get about 2/3 of the way through them and then start skimming them because I'm like, all right, I'm done. How much more can I stomach? We're talking 8 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years, how Landon Donovan, how that's important. Nah.
I mean, it's interesting because it shows, as if you can say the article has a true bent, it does show or point to the fact that there was just a lot of, I guess you could say, ineptitude in the leadership or just lack of leadership in U.S. soccer over the last so many years, that really Galati was a terrible president.
Galati's a businessman. He teaches business at Columbia. He gave economics, right? He gave the keys to Jurgen, and that was probably his mistake. That Jurgen with the key, but that was the only way you were going to get Jurgen. And again, my other sport analogy is the Pistons with Stan Van Gundy. They had to make him the president of basketball operations to get him in to be the coach. You had to give him the entire keys. The Cleveland Browns, when they brought in Mike Holmgren, or the Seahawks when they brought in Mike Holmgren many years ago, you had to get him. You had to give him everything, and that was the way they got Jurgen. And that was probably the same way they got Bruce Arena out of Los Angeles. Is you had to give him that same amount of power and authority. For Sunil, again, like you said, he's an economics professor. He's not a soccer guy. He doesn't. If there's a responsibility to U.S. soccer in general, it's lacking any sort of soccer, for lack of a better term, a general manager, somebody who is overseeing it. But like I said, I wonder if that was how they were able to get Jurgen into camp, was by giving him the keys for everything.
I mean, I think that's certainly part of it. One of the things they talk about is that you're going to demand an awful lot. I mean, anyone who was following U.S. soccer saw all the push, and we really thought we were going to get Jurgen in 2010. And then, it turns out he just demanded too much. And then because of what happened with Bayern Munich and stuff, his value had just dipped enough that he couldn't demand as much. We could offer less and have him accept it. And that's how it came to be. It is interesting. I mean, there's talk in there that Timmy Chandler told Bobby Wood not to play in the TNT game because he was nursing an injury. No. I'm sorry, it was earlier than that. And not to play in the Costa Rica game because he was nursing an injury from the Mexico game in Columbus. It's funny to hear that, that Chandler was saying, don't do this because you still got to go play for your club in a week, and who pays the bills? This is everything we always wondered about Timmy Chandler. And, then promptly he was not with the team because Arenas didn't call him in. So some things were reinforced. Kind of like you said, a lot of it you've probably heard before. And, I'm sure there's another side to this story. I'm sure there's another side to many portions of the story. It is, however, pretty interesting to me because of maybe my feelings kind of about how all this went down and the players within that story. Arena, I think, like I said, is maybe a little, it sort of whitewashes what happened under him. Like the errors were all prior to kind of him arriving. I won't say it says he did the best he could because it doesn't necessarily make him look good, but I think it sort of glosses over the last 9 months or whatever it was, 10 months of qualification under him, in which we also failed.
So let me ask you this question: Is it that U.S. Soccer, when they gave the keys to Jurgen, didn't fully implement his system, didn't give him enough time to implement his system? I'm talking more the technical director side of him, putting the youth national team programs in place, or was it Jurgen just wasn't up to the job in general? I almost or is the truth somewhere in between on those?
I think it's somewhere in between, which has kind of been my stance all along. He has good ideas, but he doesn't know how to execute them, and he's not somebody who turns to, like, I don't know, the best person to go execute them for him. He tends to find friends, or maybe you could even say yes men, who will come in and support his vision or reinforce his vision, but he's not necessarily getting them to enact it. They're really just, I think, almost like an echo chamber reinforcing what he's saying. And that's great if the ideas work, but the problem is you have to somehow make them a reality. When you look at like what Philip Lahm said in his book about how they realized shortly after he arrived that it was going to be down to the players to determine what was going to happen when he was coaching Bayern. You heard a lot of the same things from U.S. players, that they had to kind of figure it out for themselves. I think it was Kyle Martino in the article who says he went and watched one of the practices because he'd been hearing this, and it was clear players weren't even finding out their positions until like the day of a match. So they didn't know where they were even going to be playing. Klinsmann wanted to change everything up, and then they also said that there were things that he would stress, but then he would not kind of follow through on them later, almost like he was just, I don't know, jumping from idea to idea. And you can't build any kind of consistency with that. It did, however, so some of the other things, I guess, that interested me about the article, like I saw somebody say that we should have coached the game on Saturday. And one of the things I noticed was they talked about how Cameron felt like he'd been doing everything Klinsmann wanted. He didn't necessarily. They don't come out and say this because Cameron isn't directly interviewed in there, and so there's no way to prove this. But it makes it sound like he didn't necessarily respect maybe Arena because he felt like he'd never played at the same level I played. So how the hell does he know what I'm going through or what I've been through? I wonder a little bit if, say, we do select an MLS coach going forward, will some of the international players perhaps feel the same way? I think this is the time to do it because you got a bunch of young kids, so they're maybe not as...
Well, and I'm going to kind of take this in a little different direction, and then we'll come back to this.
All right.
But it fits into there. You're seeing the rumors of Jesse Marsch heading to Leipzig before, and where's Leipzig when you need them? Later, before the summer's out. And the reason why I bring that up is, if he goes to Leipzig, does that give credibility to anybody that would come in from the from MLS to take over the national team? Oscar Pereira or somebody like that.
Maybe.
Do they get more credibility with the internationals when you say, hey, look, Jesse Marsch is going to Leipzig. I get it. It's within the system. He's doing that system well. But yet, hey, if he's good enough to do it, maybe these other guys know what the hell they're talking about a little bit as well. And then furthermore, just kind of piggyback on that, and then we'll go back to the article. Now, you know what? We'll come back to that. Let's go back to the article.
I think it has the possibility, but I think he has to go and succeed first. Like in a year, maybe that helps reflect on him. Otherwise, I don't know, maybe it becomes a bit like Bob Bradley, where it was big news for the U.S. that he was going to coach in the Premier League, and 3 months later, 4 months later, whatever it was, he was rather unceremoniously dumped, and an awful lot of people, I mean, it's mainly our Welsh visitors, can't stand him and think that no American should ever coach there again. So it has the potential to improve the value of other MLS coaches, but it also has the the a bit. I guess the risk that it could hurt them too if he goes and promptly fails.
All right, so I mean, again, to me, like I said, it's so then okay. Then my other question is kind of going back to talking about that the players really didn't know their role, they didn't know what they were doing, and yeah, that's definitely a handicap because I would like to hope these guys studied film. They would look at tape. They would look at who they're probably lining up against to get some ideas. How much of that goes back, though, in the lack of leadership of Michael Bradley? I mean, he's your captain. If he's your captain, and this has kind of been in my mind for a little bit of late, and again, probably revisionist history as much as anything, is inability to keep Jermaine Jones from going walkabout, to slam the door after Cameron mouthed off and just be like, bring Timmy, get inspiration out of Timmy Chandler. You said, I mean, one of the themes is the lack of leadership. How much of that goes back on, you said, in the players and Michael Bradley? But then again, how much of these guys are supposed to be professionals? These guys are supposed to be the best of the best. How much of it is on them as men just to be men and stand up and do the right thing? And like I said, there was a lot of in that.
When they talk about Bradley in there, they do say that he could be a polarizing figure within the team as well, which does make you wonder. Well, then why was he still serving as captain? That some people saw it as he made too much money and sat in MLS. Some people saw it as he was too hard on them. I don't know.
It's a good question. And with Bradley, is there any sort of, I don't know, lack of a better term, jealousy within the fact that he got life-changing money to go to MLS? He doubled his salary to go back and play in Canada. Yeah. And let's face it, if you're coming from Europe and you want to go to play in MLS, Toronto might be one of the better places you can go aside from maybe Los Angeles. But because Toronto's
it is now. It wasn't necessarily when he went. But,
I'm not saying the team. I'm just saying going to live in general. If I'm going to go from Europe, going to live in Toronto is a pretty damn nice place to live. So, and he got to double or triple his salary to do so. Yeah, I could see some resentment, but at the same time, a leader's got to step up and a leader's got to lead. And that was throughout the Klinsmann time, you could always feel that there was definitely a lack of that, and how much of it was Klinsmann neutering Bradley from doing that as well. Your senior leaders can do that at any point. If they're taking away your ability to take care of the people you're supposed to be in charge of, that's a problem. So
I quite liked. I think it's an indirect quote from Dempsey when Bradley went to him and asked should we be looking at maybe forcing the issue and getting Klinsmann out of here? And he said, "Look, I wouldn't have done it to your dad. I'm not going to do it to him. I just want to I can't remember if he says I want to play soccer and fish, or if he said I just want to score goals and go fishing." But either way, it's that was an awesome quote.
And aside from the safety of the referee's notebook, that's pretty much Pete Clint Dempsey.
Yeah.
So, I would like to interrupt the show just to kind of, and I know Pat will watch this later. We do have a Hat Guy sighting, or he did check in. He's been kidnapped by the Bro-Rel unit, and it's because of his support of MLS and his killing off of NASL that Hat Guy probably will not be joining us tonight. So if Pat wasn't being paid in Garber bucks and not trying to kill off MLS or NASL with his, with this show, that's what happened to Pat tonight. Did I miss anything, or did I cover that one pretty well?
No, I think that's pretty good assessment of his text.
And did the art, and I didn't make it all the way through the article. Not gonna lie, just lost interest at some point. Did they blame Don Garber? Did they blame MLS as a conspiracy to hold down soccer in this country for the benefit of the NFL?
Because much to the greater chagrin
that's what happened.
Of soccer Twitter, they did not.
We know that's what happened. It was all a conspiracy from Don Garber to hold down soccer in this country for the express purposes of building up the NFL again.
Hashtag pro rel.
Yes.
No, they did not. They did not do those things. So anyway, I encourage people to read it. It's fairly long, but they talk to a lot of people. A number of them, at least on the record. I mean, they say there were like 40 or more or something off the record. But there are some interesting comments there, and it does point to, I think, why such maybe revolution is the right word. A revolution was needed in our latest election, and why maybe it was disappointing that we didn't see it in the outcome.
Well, revolution too much isn't necessarily a good thing. I think Cordero, I don't know enough about Cordero. I don't care. I like his idea of having somebody as a general manager in that role. And we've talked about it. Klinsmann would have been perfect in that role because his game management was shit.
Yeah.
It seemed like he had a great vision for how the future of U.S. soccer should be built. Get him out of game managing, let him do it. That would have been a perfect role for him. I think Ernie Stewart will do a fine job. Ernie Stewart, he was in Ajax? Wasn't he running it? He was running somebody. Feyenoord, yeah. He's made the Philadelphia Union reasonable on a shoestring budget. I mean, he knows a bit about it, and he knows the European game. He knows the American game. I think he'd be a perfect guy for it assuming he takes that job. I think that's a good fit. The women's team, unfortunately, I'm not as well versed in, and being able to say who should be running that one. Hope Solo comes to mind. No, I'm just kidding. But there is a U.S. women's game coming up this week, is there not, Christopher?
There is, yeah. 2 days away. U.S.-China, Thursday night.
Where?
Oh, God. Is it San Jose? I know this.
Sure.
I can't remember where the men's game is on Saturday either, other than I know it's in France. Hold on, maybe I can pull it up here. Damn it.
Hang on, keep going. Just keep going and give me your assessment.
Anyway, what I was going to say is, look, China's 17th in the world. The U.S. is number 1. And while I do think that playing field is leveling, there's still a much more dramatic fall off in the women's game between like number 1 or 2 and number 15 plus. So you tend to think that the women are probably going to fairly well handle China. On top of it, they've got a pretty experienced roster, and Sam Ewis and Tobin Heath are both back.
Sure.
So you've got some players with actual firm national team experience, players who maybe not have the leading role, but play a leading role in the team returning. I would tend to think that means something in the nature of 2-3-0, maybe 3-1.
Wasn't there a point when China was number 2 or 3 in the world for women? I mean, which really shows you how much I want to say for really the ones that have stepped into place is Europe. But
absolutely.
I think back to the Brandy Chastain game, China was number 2 or 3 in the world. It's not like they were a fluke finalist for that game. It's just the rest of the world has caught up, specifically Europe, specifically France, England, Germany, and so on. Australia. Cleveland, by the way, is your answer. So if you ever thought that U.S. soccer hated the women's team, they sent them to Cleveland. So there might be an argument to be had there. And they will be. Looks like they're going to be wearing the pride numbers. Which, by the way, what about Ireland wearing the pride numbers? How is that for a little bit interesting?
It's because they a year ago made gay marriage legal, and this was their first Pride Month. So that's why they chose to do it. I didn't hear in advance that we were far in advance. Like I'd heard, I don't know, a week or something in advance that Ireland was going to do it. I only heard that we were going to do it like the day before, 2 days before, something like that. So I don't know if we did it to kind of match with them, or if maybe both sides determined it in advance and just Ireland only announced it. I don't know.
And Christian pointed out, thanks, Christian, the game's in Lyon.
Yeah.
So, yeah. 2-3-0 seems about right for the women's national team. It's a decent team. China isn't what they once were. I'm not sure what that all means. I'm not sure it matters. I guess they have to play games periodically, but it's the middle of the NWSL season. Whatever. They have to go to Cleveland, so I do feel bad for the women for that. And playing in a football stadium with 15,000 people in it. Hopefully Cleveland shows up. But
I once went to a national team game in Cleveland in June. It was a send off for I think 2006 World Cup.
I'm guessing the state. I'm guessing
U.S. Venezuela.
I'm guessing the stadium's really nice. Looks like it's right on the lake, but
it was pretty nice.
It's still Cleveland. It's still Cleveland.
Yeah.
The mistake on the lake. Which Chicago.
There were some things I saw there that I was surprised by. I'd never been to Cleveland before, or at least never stopped in Cleveland. I think I'd driven by a few times, but never actually stopped there. There were some things that I thought were actually really cool. Like we stayed in Pat and I went. We stayed in this hotel that it's like the oldest mall in the country or something. It's now been turned into like the upstairs is a I don't know Hilton or Hyatt or something I think, and bottom I think it's still retail or it's like small shops and stuff for like downtown workers. That was like the building itself is amazing. It's like the first shopping mall I think in the country. So look it up. It has this like beautiful glass roof over it. Really cool looking. There were some good restaurants and some cool bars I guess that we went to before the game, but otherwise it was.
It's Cleveland, dude. It's Cleveland.
It's Cleveland, yeah.
Sorry, Ryan. I disagree with you. They did not. LeBron did not have Cleveland, or Cleveland did not have LeBron. LeBron had Cleveland. LeBron allows Cleveland to exist. So, on that note,
what else times in Cleveland today? Beyond that, I think we've pretty much covered it all. I will say, should we predict a final score for U.S.-France?
2-0 France.
I'm gonna go 3-1 France.
I think the biggest positive out of that is going to be what I want. The only thing I'm looking forward to in this game is I want to see what Zach Stefan can do with the competition stepping up a whole lot more than Paraguay. Like I said, I'm convinced he's the future. I am very bullish on his future, but competition is going to be a hell of a lot better this time around. So, I still think 2-0. I think he's going to have an outstanding game, but.
I hope so. I mean, that was the one part of playing Bill Hamid that I understood is that maybe they were planning to keep Stefan for the bigger game, but they wanted to still give Hamid a run out. So you put him in the lesser of the two. But otherwise,
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. But why do you pull him away? Have him on the roster and bring him later. He can fly in on Sunday. You don't need him there. To bring Zach Stefan in and have him just sit the whole time in Ireland.
Yeah.
To me, is kind of
that is a good
waste.
Christian says he thought Jesse Gonzalez was the future for you.
I'm not. He's been hurt the last year, and what I saw was Zach Stefan last year in that game again in the MLS playoffs last year, especially that game in Atlanta in front of 60,000. He seemed unnerved by that. And I get it, it's MLS, but it's still 60,000 in a loud stadium. And to be able to play as well as he did, the way he played in that, did with the penalties, there's a whole lot of athleticism. He seems to read the game really well. And Jesse Gonzalez's injuries, he's kind of fallen off my radar. I'm not saying he won't be back on it, but I think right now I've become very bullish on Zach Stefan going forward. So, and why bring in William Yarbrough? Because why did Bruce Arena and Jurgen Klinsmann bring in what's his name, Nick Raimondo? Because you need a third goalie. That's why you bring him in. So,
all right. Well, on that note, any last thoughts?
Nah, I got nothing tonight. How about you?
All right. Well, in that case, we are USFanTV. Once again, I'm Chris. This is TJ. Pat, whatever. He's off.
Kidnapped by aliens.
He's off making the world right for Pro Row. We are USFanTV, as I said. You can find us at USFanTV.com, on Twitter, kind of the same place, Facebook, Instagram, things like that. YouTube. YouTube. You can actually find us on YouTube, unbelievably. If you hadn't seen us already.
And you can find Chris on Snapchat, believe it or not.
No, you won't. You won't find me. Anyway, yeah, so we're all those places. We're here on Tuesdays. As for our when we'll recap France, actually, we'll probably do a recap of France after the game. We didn't do one this weekend because we kind of all had stuff that was interfering, and I can't do live. I was actually out watching the game, and I can't do live remote from anywhere because
Chris versus technology wins. Let's face it.
Usually the case. So anyway, we will probably be on Saturday to bring that to you.
Christian, Christian might be
not finalized our plans.
Christian might be right. Pat's on Pornhub.
That's actually where he is. And that said, you are done.
You're done.
Thanks, everybody.